Welcome back, 7 Ways to Wealth family. In this video, I'm going to show you how you're going to preserve your wealth. I know that you're intentional about building wealth. I know that that wealth that you're building is going to last generations. I know that you're creating a legacy right now as we speak. And because you're creating a legacy, you need to preserve that legacy. So one thing that I know for sure is that you're not going to be able to preserve that wealth if you're building that wealth in your personal name. So I'm about to tell you 2 things that you have to do in order to preserve that wealth and preserve it the right way so that it can last all the generations that you want it to last, right? How many generations do you want it to last? 10, 15, 20? Your grandkids, kids? Well, if that's the case, then the first thing that you have to do is you have to build that wealth utilizing an entity. You cannot build that wealth in your personal name. Why? Because it can be taken away from you, because it's a liability, because it's not protected in your personal name. It's gonna end up in probate, and you don't want that to happen. You don't want the entirety of your wealth to be the decision of a judge. So, because you're intentional about building wealth, you're going to create an entity where you're going to house that wealth for generations and generations. The entity that you're going to create is a trust fund. All the wealthiest families have done it. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. All we have to do is copy and paste. It's that simple. So what you're going to do, just like the Rockefellers, just like the Gates, just like the Waltons, you are going to create a trust. That trust is going to own the wealth, meaning all of the assets that you are accumulating today. Okay, so the trust is going to own the house. The trust is going to own the business. The trust is going to own the cars. The trust is going to own the bank accounts. The trust is going to own the insurance policies, all of the assets. So that's the first thing that you need. You need a trust entity because it's seen as a living, breathing person. So if you are a living, breathing person, you can literally copy and paste yourself and right here have a living, breathing trust, okay? I know it sounds silly, but do your research. A trust is seen as a living entity. So that's the type of entity that you have to create if you're intentional about preserving the wealth that you're accumulating right now. The second thing that you have to do is understand that you are a human asset within your trust. You are the human resource. I hope you know that. And because you're the human resource and the number one asset in your trust, you have to be insured. You have to be protected. Your life has to be protected. So that means that the trust is going to take out an insurance policy on you and every single person attached to the trust. So all of the trustees, all of the beneficiaries. Because if something happens to you, that is going to be detrimental to the trust. You're the trustee. You're the one operating the trust. So if something happens to the human resource or the number one asset, the trust needs to be compensated for that loss. So the trust is going to take out a policy on you. The trust is going to be the owner of the policy, the payer of the policy, and the beneficiary of the policy. So that if and when something happens to you, the trust is compensated for that loss which will guarantee the preservation of wealth. You're the one that's operating and controlling the trust right now. So if something happens to you, like I said, the trust needs to be compensated. Meaning that since your life is insured, when you transition, the trust is going to receive that death benefit. So that's the compensation, which will guarantee the preservation of your trust estate and the wealth that you're creating, okay? So back to the concept of the trust insuring every single person associated with the trust. So the trust is going to insure you as the trustee and the beneficiaries. So every single trustee is going to have a policy. Every single beneficiary is going to have a policy. And the trust is going to do the application for these insurance policies. These are going to be whole life policies, meaning that they insure your entire life, not term, okay? And you want to be building cash value. So the policy that I recommend is an index universal life insurance policy, okay? And the company that I recommend is going to be down in the description below. So the trust is going to do an application for every single beneficiary that is associated with a trust and every future beneficiary. So if your grandkids are, expecting right now, as soon as that baby is born, within 30 days of their birth, the trust is going to take out a life insurance policy on them, which is a beautiful thing, because now what's going to happen is we're going to jumpstart that preservation of wealth. So since every single beneficiary is insured and the trust is just paying into the policies, what can happen is fast forward into the future. That baby that the trust insured at 30 days old is now 18. And what's going to happen? Well, they want to buy a car. They want to buy their first car. They're 18. They're ready to go. They're off to college, right? And so normally what they would do is they would go to a dealership and they would, sit down, run their credit, and get into a car note with the dealership, okay? And that is the typical process to where they get the loan. They have to now pay the dealership on a monthly basis for that car loan that's going to be carrying on for the next 60 months, right? So that is the normal process of that beneficiary actually receiving a car loan for that vehicle. Or the alternative could be that they actually go to the trust. So they contact the trustee, which is you or whoever is the trustee in the future, and they let them know that they want to take out a loan from the trust, okay? Because trustees and beneficiaries can take out loans from the trust estate. So instead of that beneficiary taking out a $30,000 loan with the dealership, they're going to take out a $30,000 loan with the trust estate. So now the trustee is going to issue them a check for $30,000. They're going to execute a promissory note so that the beneficiary is aware that 1, it's a loan, 2, they need to be paid back. What are the terms? Well, the terms are going to be like any other financial institution, right? They are going to have to pay back the principal, which is the $30,000, over a period of time, let's just say 48 months, plus interest, right? So let's just say 2% interest because it's a beneficiary versus them going to a dealership and paying 10% interest, okay? So now they're going to have to actually still have a car note, right? And they're going to have to pay that loan back monthly to the trust. They were to go to the dealership and pay $500 a month. So now the first thing that I want you to be aware of is that the trust is going to be generating income. How? Because they're going to be receiving 2% interest from that $30,000 loan that they issued to the beneficiary. The beneficiary is now going to pay them on a monthly basis $350. So that is income from the trust, okay? So that is income for the trust. That is going to aid in the preservation of wealth because the trust is actually producing 2% returns on the money. So let's just fast forward and say that the beneficiary decides to default on the loan, which is a no-no. That's not what we want, but sometimes life happens. So the beneficiary defaulted on the loan and is no longer paying that $350 a month. What is going to happen? Well, one thing that I want you to know is that that loan was a risk-free loan. How is that possible? How is it that that $30,000 loan was a risk-free loan? Well, allow me to explain. So that loan was risk-free because it did not come from the trust estate. It was not a part of the trust funds. That money came directly from the insured policy. What do I mean by that? Well, that beneficiary is insured with an index universal life insurance policy. So the trustee went and borrowed against that asset. The trustee contacted the insurance company and requested a $30,000 loan specifically from that beneficiary's policy. And then the insurance carrier issued them a check for the $30,000. So the trustee went and deposited that check and then reissued a new check from the trust to the beneficiary. So that money originally came from the life insurance policy of the beneficiary, right? But the beneficiary is not allowed to directly receive loans from the insurance company because they're not the owner of the policy, they're only the insured. So everything has to come through the trust estate and through the trustee. Beautiful process. So now what I mean by this loan being risk-free is that since the beneficiary decided to default on the loan, what happened was that the trust is now responsible for those funds. It's risk-free because the money came from the policy, and so it doesn't need to be paid back, because it's going to be taken out of the death benefit. So the trust estate is actually going to be replenished and continue on in preservation once the beneficiary transitions or expires. So that is what I mean by preservation of wealth, because now that beneficiary that defaulted on that loan, right, for the $30,000, they transitioned. Their death benefit was $10 million. So now you had took out a loan for 30, didn't have to pay it back, but the death benefit is $10 million. So the trust is going to get paid back through the death benefit, but it's also going to secure the funds for generations to come because they were replenished by that benefit. So that is what I mean by you preserving your wealth. You need to utilize these top two tools: a trust and an insurance policy owned by the trust. I'm not talking about just any regular insurance policy. I'm talking about a insurance policy that is specifically taken out by the trust or owned by the trust, and it's actually building cash value. So those are the tools that you need. I hope that you take action and start preserving your wealth the right way so that it can last generations and generations and generations to come, and hundreds of years and hundreds of years and hundreds of years to come. So if you want to learn more about how to set up a trust or how to preserve your wealth, you need to get into the Wealthy Trustee program, okay? There's going to be a link in the description box below or the pinned comments where you can go and sign up for the program because you want to start protecting the wealth that you're creating today. I'll see you in the next video.